The books that I want to read and write depict human behavior in a way that's hauntingly real. And I think if you're writing about contemporary characters, you have to have an opinion and see the world in a certain way, and you have to be able to listen to the politics of our world right now.
Hello and welcome to Ways to Change the World. I'm Krishnan Guru-Murthy, and this is the podcast in which we talk to extraordinary people about the big ideas in their lives and the events that have helped shape them. My guest this week is the author Kiley Reid. Now, her debut novel was an extraordinary success. Such a Fun Age was a bestseller in the Sunday Times and New York Times bestseller lists, and she now has her second novel, which is a very different story. It's set in a university dormitory. It's called Come and Get It. And it's, rather than an examination of race and class, which perhaps the first book was talked about a lot as, this one is much more about money and consumerism and our thirst for buying things. Kylie, thank you very much indeed for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you're a professor or an assistant professor.
I am.
And you've written about university students. So how real is Come and Get It?
Come and Get It is completely fictionalized, but I will say I am greatly inspired by real life. The fiction that I like to read sounds like real people and has a heightened level of normalcy that's both real and surreal on a certain level. And so for this book, I did interview about 30 to 40 people, a lot of students included. And sometimes they would say something that was perfect and it went straight into the novel. But more than anything, I wanted to get the feel for this youthful dialect down perfectly.
I mean, what was the basic idea? You know, why did you decide on this subject matter?
I wanted to write about young people and money. I felt like a dorm was a perfect place to explore consumerism and buying things. I don't know if it's the same thing here, but in the United States, buying dorm essentials and shaping your room to your personality and becoming an adult in this room is a huge part of the coming of age process for many students. And so I wanted to talk about the nightmare of buying things without community and culture, and a dorm seemed like the perfect place to do that in. So basically, a lot of the time when I want to write a novel, I think of a scenario and what could go wrong. There's a book called Paying for the Party, How College Maintains Inequality, written by two sociologists. And in that book, it's a study, a 5-year study, where sociologists interview students in a dorm. And the book is great on its own, marking pathways for students of who college works for and who it doesn't work for. But more than anything, I loved the premise, and I thought, what could go wrong here in a novel?
Well, how long did it take you?
This one took 4 years.
That's a long time.
It's a long time.
Why?
Art takes what it takes. You know, there was a pandemic. I had a little baby girl. Things take what they take, and you really don't want to rush these things. This is my second novel, but I would say it's the second published novel. There were many before, and some take very short time and some take longer.
Yes, I mean, I spoke about your first novel. People talk about your debut novel being this huge. It wasn't the first novel you wrote.
Right. No, there were many failed ones before then. It was just the first one that made it.
So you're then sort of in that very difficult situation of having this smash hit first novel, longlisted in the Booker, bestseller, no doubt made lots of people lots of money, and then you've got to come up with a second book. So, I mean, how daunting is that?
It's a great problem to have, that people want to see something wonderful from you. But if you are in the business of writing to get great reviews and reception from every book you're in, you should not be in the field. You have to write what is on your heart to write at the moment. Honestly, it felt like a bit of a freebie, if that makes sense, like a get-out-of-jail-free card. Because Such a Fun Age did so well, I had a professor say to me, now write the book that no one would have let you publish the first time. Make sure this one is just for you. And so that's what I was thinking about when I was writing this book.
So let's go back to Such a Fun Age then.
Yeah.
I mean, it came out in the wake of, the Black Lives Matter protests, various police killings, but notably the George Floyd killing. To what extent do you think it was sort of swept along on that wave?
It came out in December of 2019. And then in February 2020 was COVID, which means everyone was home and reading. And then that summer was when George Floyd died. And so you're absolutely right that summer, a lot of white people in particular were grabbing Black art as a fix and saying, I don't like what I see on the news. I feel like I'm complicit. What can I do? I'm going to support Black artists. Okay, I'm done. Racism is over for me for a little bit. So you do not get to choose what brings people to your art, and hopefully people would want to come back to my work. I really do hope that people could look at Black art as an entertainment item and not as a pedagogical tool, because I definitely do not write fiction to make anyone learn anything or preach my politics.
You're not trying to change the world?
Through my novels, no. I think a novel can change my world. I've had books that change the way that I think about the world, but I do not think that novels change the world. I think that's a bit romantic.
I mean, you're written about as somebody, as a sort of joining that list of people who are able to sort of chronicle the modern world. Mm-hmm. Is that really what you're about? You're trying to tell modern real stories.
That's accurate. The books that I want to read and write depict human behavior in a way that's hauntingly real. And I think if you're writing about contemporary characters, you have to have an opinion and see the world in a certain way, and you have to be able to listen to the politics of our world right now.
So when you were writing Such a Fun Age, to what extent was injustice part of the story that you were trying to approach?
So I have maybe a hot take on this one. I think the best novels don't start with a theme. I think the best novels start with a person. I try to work my way up from people in conflict, and then the bigger themes kind of present themselves to me. I wasn't saying this is how it is for all Black women. I was saying this is how it is for this one woman at this one time in Philadelphia in 2015. You have to start with people, or I think the cracks start to show through.
When you say, you're very happy for people to support Black artists, but you would hope that they would come to you for entertainment. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you already feel pigeonholed as a Black writer to some degree, or that there is a weight of expectation on you to write about Black people and Black issues and racism, and to be a spokesperson for your generation, if you like?
Well, I mean, I do think there's a lot of pressure on a lot of Black artists, and they feel that pressure. As far as my books are concerned, I'm really lucky to have a team that is excited about whatever I want to write about. And my editor has said to me, you write what you want to write, and then we will work on packaging it as a novel. I personally want to do something a little bit different every time. I have students who fall into this trap of trying to recreate the magic of the piece that got them into graduate school. They want to keep telling that story over and over again. And I try to get them out of that, because they're not going to grow as artists that way, but also I don't think that they're going to have a career that way. Of course, a lot of people would want to read Such a Fun Age too, but that's not what I'm writing. I want to have a long, long career, and I just have to listen to my obsessions and go with that no matter what.
So Come and Get It examines the conversations that students have, and is a sort of a chronicle of eavesdropping once we get into it. What is it that you're exploring there? What is it you wanted to delve into?
There's a theme of money that presents itself in all of my work, but specifically here, I wanted to talk about consumerism and the things that we try to purchase when we're purchasing something else. There's Millie, she's our protagonist. She's a resident assistant in a dorm, and she wants to buy a house. And for her, a house represents adulthood and her coming into her own. There's characters like Agatha who spend money on other women and try and make them behave in certain ways by paying them money. And then there's someone like Kennedy, a young, lonely transfer student who doesn't think she has a relationship to consumption, but when she feels lonely, when she has a panic attack, she finds herself at Target wanting to shop around. I'm really fascinated by our accumulation of stuff and what the stuff says about us and what we're trying to get it to say about us. I think that living in a class society, we are told if you want to be faster, stronger, better, all you have to do is buy this stuff. That's what I was focusing on here.
But as you say, you've got different characters with very different backgrounds. I mean, Millie's desire for a house is a really common dream and desire, and increasingly difficult and unattainable for huge numbers of people.
Exactly.
Now, you don't judge really in the book. You don't write with judgment. But I mean, you understand that need for the house, for the home.
Completely. It's my job to be a democratic and generous reader. And I completely understand Millie wanting to have a house. I would have loved to have a house when I was 24. What drives my writing is the limitations I see placed on our world. And then I can let my characters misbehave and act badly within those strange constructions. So while Millie is thinking, oh, I want to buy a house, then I can be an adult, I would hope that my readers can zoom out and say, well, what if she didn't have to buy a house? What if she didn't have to work while she was in school? The position as an RA, Millie has to be on all the time. I was an RA for 1 year.
Just explain what an RA is for people. Yeah.
Yes. An RA is a very American position at a dorm where it's called a resident assistant, and it's a student leadership type of role where a student is in charge of maybe their floor or 30 girls, and they are the person that's receiving lots of complaints from students. Someone might say, I'm lonely, can I talk to you? Or I'd have a fight with my friend, or I have to move out, can you help me? And it's a leadership role. So usually you receive free housing and maybe $200 to $300 a month. I think I received $700 a semester when I was an RA.
Did you have the same sort of dreams?
Buying a house? Oh, God, no. I knew that was very unattainable, but I definitely wanted stability. I wanted a footing underneath me and to feel like I could have financial stability while I figured out what I want to do with my life. So Millie is a lot more organized and hospitable than I was, but we definitely both had dreams of being financially stable.
So let's talk about your background then and how you became a writer.
Sure.
Because you studied drama.
I was a theater major, and I think that that's where a lot of my penchant for dialogue comes in. I was a theater major, and I was working a lot. I was a nanny for 20 hours a week when I was in school, and after school, I was auditioning and trying to be an actress, and very quickly finding out that I would much rather be writing scripts than performing them. But I had somewhere in the 50s of different types of jobs in my 20s to support all of those dreams.
But where did you come from? I mean, what was life? What was childhood? You know, what was your background?
I loved reading. My parents definitely wanted me to have an education and goals for my future. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. It was very hot. That's why I would describe my childhood. Yeah.
Well, what did your parents do? What kind of home was it?
I'm a little bit cagey when it comes to talking about my family, just because I want to keep it their business. All I can say is that they supported me and made sure that education was number one for me.
But what was the dream then for you at that stage? You know,
Oh, Lord.
What did you want? Because studying drama, you would imagine, presumably you wanted to do something related.
That was it. The dream, well, I think until I was around 10, I was being a veterinarian, and then I learned that there was like blood and stuff involved in that, so that wasn't going to work out. But then I wanted to be an actress. I was obsessed with storytelling, and I thought that was the vehicle that I wanted to use for my storytelling ability. And very quickly, I learned that I would rather be behind the scenes. I shot a commercial when I was 21, and I shot it on my birthday, and I remember it paid $500, and that seemed like such a large amount of money. I thought, this is it. And I shot the commercial, and I thought, I was so bored. I had no creative outlet, and that kind of started me thinking about taking writing seriously.
And had you written all along?
I'd written since I was a young child, and written novel-sized manuscripts. And when I went to school for theater, I would lie to my professors and tell them that I found monologues in plays, but I would really just write them on my own. And I would say, oh, I found this monologue. And they would say, what play is that from? And I was like, oh, it's this very Black play. And they would say, oh, yes, I'm familiar with that. No problem, you can go ahead. And I probably should have understood at that point that I should have been writing rather than performing.
I mean, to say you lost the dream of acting from doing a commercial is sort of, because you wouldn't expect a commercial to be a very creative process.
No.
But it didn't make you think, oh, but I want to do a film or a TV or a...
I think that for a lot of actors, those are experiences that they have to count up until they get those big breaks. And I think I was a bit impatient. I would have rather been writing than doing anything else. And I remember very quickly signing up for a writing class, and that was the start of everything.
So how did you make a living?
I was nannying, I was waitressing, I worked at Godiva Chocolate, I was a magician's assistant for about 8 weeks. I did a lot of different jobs just to pay the bills. For the longest time when I was writing, I was a receptionist, and I would stay and write in the biggest conference room in the design firm where I worked every Friday night. And then I felt like there was so much I didn't know that I wanted to go to graduate school. So I applied to graduate school. And the first time around, I got 9 rejections. And the second time, I got 9 acceptances.
So how long did you have to sort of believe in yourself doing these other jobs?
Far too long. I would say I was taking writing seriously from the time I was 22 to 29 while I was working other jobs. And then when
that's a long time. That's a big investment.
Long time.
For somebody who gave up on acting from doing one commercial in one day.
Yeah, it was a long time.
You then spent 7 years believing that you would be a writer.
That's the thing. I didn't think I would be a writer. I wanted to find a stable job that I could work while I was writing. And so I thought if I go to graduate school, I can be a teacher. I wanted to go to programs that had a teaching component. And I thought I could be a teacher and write on the side and maybe hopefully get something published. That was always the goal. I never saw writing as a full-time professional career opportunity.
So how did you go from having various failed projects to a bestseller?
I took maybe 100 pages of Such a Fun Age to graduate school. I went into the novel writing workshop, and I had a really wonderful class and a wonderful professor. I finished the book. I sent out queries to different agents, and I was bowled over to see a response. And that summer, in between my first and second year of graduate school, we sold my book, and everything changed overnight.
So what was the difference between that manuscript and the ones that were rejected?
Simplistically, it was much better, but something had definitely changed within my writing from the earlier writing days to the later ones. Within my first attempt at graduate school, looking back now, my sample and my cover letters and statements were all presenting with an attitude that said, "Can I be a writer at your school?" And then my second ones, when I knew more what I was doing, the attitude was more, "This is what I want to write about. Do you want to have me do it at your school?" I had so much more confidence in the things that I was interested in. I could research. I could achieve a voice instead of just pretending to be a writer. There was a big change that happened in that time.
I mean, and that's really interesting as well, that you achieve a voice. So the voice, is it you? Or is it a voice you've created that is Kiley Reid, the author? Or
I wish I knew. It's some ethereal presence that I think that we're all trying to achieve in our art, some authorial, dictating. But I do want to do something different for every novel that I do. So hopefully that voice changes over time.
I mean, why? I mean, a lot of people get very successful doing series.
Telling the same story over and over again. You're absolutely right. And that sustains some certain people, and that's really great. I want to stretch myself a bit not just in terms of my own voice, but in terms of who I speak to and what I learned about the world. That's the only reason I'm here, is to have a further and deeper understanding of human behavior and to put that on a page in a really beautiful way.
And you're still teaching?
I'm still teaching every Monday this semester, yeah.
And is that something you intend to carry on with?
I do. I love teaching. Teaching makes me go back to the reason why I started writing in the first place. And right now I get to teach a lot of students who are writing first and second chapters of their own novels, and reading their work makes me take a red pen to my own work a little bit faster. It's like taking a bar class as if I was a ballerina. It's really inspiring, and I'm really lucky to have really bright students as well.
I mean, I was going to say, I mean, obviously you've had a hugely successful novel, but is the gap between you as the teacher and those students that big?
It's not. It's not. And I tell them this all the time. The gap between a Word document and a published work is actually quite small. I did not have a novel, and then within 10 days it sold, and I got off of a plane in New York City, and I had a call from my agent saying, "Hey, you also have a film option in play, and you have a meeting with your new film agent who I had never met, and it happened in a cab." It all happened very quickly. I think a big trick of writing is, one, being comfortable with your writing being bad so that you can make it better. And then two, understanding that it's a very small distance between publication and not, and to make sure that what you're publishing is so focused on what you're interested in, because you're going to be talking about it for a very long time.
So was this ever bad?
Was this ever, oh, are you kidding? It was terrible. I think that's every writer is like, I have a great idea, I'm going to go home and write it, and you put it on paper and it's not what you thought it would be. I think the real writing happens with making it better and better every single day and working at it in a very gentle but dogmatic fashion.
So how do you criticize yourself? How do How do you know what's good and bad?
How do I criticize myself? Easily. I think, working at things until they start to create a rhythm in your head is really important. And the more you write a book, the more you figure out what the book is trying to do. The book kind of tells you what the story is. One of the biggest ways that I know if my work is bad is reading it out loud. It's humiliating, but I think writers have to read their work out loud to understand what their work is saying.
So have you read the whole thing out loud?
I've probably hundreds of times as I'm working on it over and over again, yes.
But it boils down to a feeling then, doesn't it?
Unfortunately, it boils down to a feeling. All of these things are so subjective. And of course, I have very early readers and my agent and my editor who are people I trust, but it does boil down to a feeling.
And so in the 4 years that it took you to write, were you actually writing for 4 years? Or did you put it away for a year and then come back to it?
I was actually writing for all of those years. Yeah, there's something about getting into the world of the book that you don't want to separate yourself from it too much. I want to be so intimately involved with these characters and what they wear and the plot lines that I don't want it to leave my mind too much. And so it's 4 years inside the world, at least that's for me.
So how is it not devastating when you get a bad review? Or someone says, it's just not as good as the first one. Or,
I think I was very well prepared. It was Such a Fun Age did really well, but that doesn't mean that everyone liked it. The more hands it got into, the more hands, won't like your work. I think if you go into a novel thinking, I'm going to be devastated if someone doesn't write it, you probably shouldn't be an artist. There are people who are not going to.
You need a thick skin.
You really need a thick skin. But also, as much as entertainment is really important to me as an artist, it's ultimately none of my business what people think of my writing. I have to be true to the process and just present a blueprint of my brain.
It's really interesting hearing you talking about it as entertainment. Is that how you think of it? You're an entertainer.
I think novels are the novels that I want to read entertain. And not every novelist feels that way, and I completely respect those beliefs, but I believe a novel should give you that, okay, I'm going to finish, one more page. That's what I'm looking for when I open up a novel.
So when people read higher purpose into your books, what do you think? Do you think, well, that's fine?
I completely welcome it. Of course, I want them to I think a novel, in my favorite world, you can read it for the plot and entertainment, or you can read it to see what the author is saying about the world that we live in today. I think it should work like a double helix and have both of those things at the same time.
But you say you're not, if you're not writing to change the way people think about things, I'm trying to understand sort of what's the mindset beyond telling a story. I mean, because you are tackling big themes. You're talking about class and race and money and desire and consumerism. So, I mean, you must have something in mind.
I don't write in order to change anyone's mind. I don't think that that's my role as an artist. I know that when I'm reading a book that is really well done, something happens where the novel forms a wormhole and I can see the gesture, I can hear the words spoken, and it's like a deep level of human connection that I'm always searching for. The novels that I want to read don't tell me what to think. They make me forget about myself. They're so true and articulate and devastating that it makes me see the world that we live in a little bit differently, and that's always what I'm trying to do.
So what do you love reading?
What do I love reading? Just about everything. Recently, on the plane ride here today, I read half of Sula for the first time, and I was captivated. I read Toni Morrison's other book, The Bluest Eye, earlier this year. She narrates them, and Sula is knocking me out as well. I read The Wager, the shipwreck book, earlier this year, which is really not my bag, but I enjoyed it very, very much. Another one that I read I read so much student work, and my students are very bright, and so I'm enjoying their work as well.
And so what's your role with your students?
I'm an assistant professor in the Helen Zell Writers Program. It's an MFA program. I'm also really lucky to be able to teach undergraduates. So it's a lot of STEM students usually who want to take an art credit, and I do an intro to fiction class with them as well.
And do they all want to be novelists, do they?
My undergraduates, no, they just want to pass the class. So we have an understanding. But my MFA students, yeah, they want to be novelists. They're some of the best in the country, and they have big publishing ambitions, and I'm there to support them.
And so are you writing at the moment?
Am I writing at the moment? I am, yeah.
And so when does book 3 come?
That's a great question. It's a little bit slower now. I'm a mother now, and I really want to take a little bit of a break and appreciate my daughter for where she is. And I honestly think that these seasons ebb and flow. And so I want to honor this one that I'm in. But as a writer, I'm never not writing. It's chemical. And so I'm always writing things on my phone, making time. And this one might take a little while, but I'm excited about it.
Are you able to sort of multitask in that way?
Absolutely. I think, as much as I love reading about artists' process and what pen they use and their schedule and everything, I do think that you just make it happen however you can, whether I'm on a plane or in a waiting room. If I hear something, I'm writing it down.
And do you think of it as work?
I do, but I love it. Luckily, yeah.
But I mean, in terms of sort of making time to do it, how old's your daughter?
She's 2 in May.
Right, so a 2-year-old's pretty demanding, all the time.
Yes.
It's quite difficult to carve out a set time unless you have a nanny or whatever it is for those times. Are you able to do that? Or?
It's not easy. It's definitely not easy, but carving out time, I think you have to be able to compartmentalize things in a way that you didn't before. But honestly, having a child, everyone is different, but having a child has made me reorganize my cosmology of the world a little bit. And if my child is happy and healthy, it makes me take bigger risk on the page because I just want to do exactly what I want to do. So I have big dreams for novel number 3, even if it doesn't happen as quickly as others might want it. I think we're going to have something really great.
But you started it?
Of course.
And have you revealed the theme?
Oh, no, not at all.
No.
I'm being very coy
about that. At what
about
point do you reveal when it's out? Or when did you tell people what Come and Get It was about?
I think the press started maybe 6 months before. But I think that when you're first writing a novel, it's almost like a baby without a face, if it's your baby, and people want to say, oh, why aren't the eyes this color? Or I thought it was going to be like this, or your other novel did this, and you have to protect it a little bit until you have that thick skin and say, this is the art I created.
And do you think of a novel when you're writing it as in a genre? Did you think of this as a campus novel or a...
I didn't. And I think that I try not to because I don't want to shoehorn myself into any limitations. The novel has to be really free-flowing. I'm a plotter, and I love a really strong, low-level dread as you're reading a book, so I like to write out what's happening. But I also feel that if my list is going according to plan, something's wrong. I'm not listening to the story. I need to go back and figure out what the characters actually want.
And do you always know what the story is?
I usually do.
You've written out
Yes.
chapter by chapter.
But sometimes I'll write a chapter because I think it's happening from that person's point of view, and writing it will show me that's actually not super interesting. You need to write it from someone else's point of view. Yeah.
In terms of driving publicity and sales for your work, I mean, you're popular on social media. How important do you think those tools are for driving entertainment? Or an old-fashioned kind of entertainment like a book.
Right. I've spoken to my publicist about this, and I agree with their assessment. If someone is naturally personable within a social media account, then wonderful. If you can boost sales that way and let people know about your work, great. But if someone feels forced to do it, they just shouldn't do it. There are plenty of authors that I really admire who have no social media and they don't need it. That's fine. You do not have to sell copies if it comes at the cost of your personal worth, and you're not going to sleep well at night. I think it's also my job to not worry about sales. I just have to worry about the art. I'm lucky to have a great team who worries about that for me, and I try and close my ears to all of that.
Can you really, though? I mean...
Ultimately, no, of course.
Because, on a promotional tour now, you're doing this interview selling a book.
Exactly. But I think that the more I focus on the sales, the less I focus on the work, and I try to keep my eyes just on the artwork.
I mean, obviously, there's a big separation, though, isn't there, between when you're promoting the book and when you've...
100%. I had a professor who
Are you even in the same headspace right now as this?
Oh, not at all. No, a professor of mine talked about how putting a book out into the world is the antithesis of writing one. And I think a lot of authors contend with the fact that they are people who are very good at being alone, and that's why they're a writer. And then they're put in the place to talk about their work. And it's not an easy transition. But I am very lucky that I've gotten to meet so many readers who appreciate the same things that I do in life. And that's really a wonderful thing as well.
And if you could change the world in any way, how would you change it?
In so many ways. But the one that stands out to me is I would implement universal health care anywhere where that's not a standard function. Both of my novels touch on health care in the United States, and the decisions many people make because they don't have it. I did not have healthcare for a few years in my 20s, and I remember the physical anxiety of wondering, am I going to cut my finger open while I'm at this restaurant? Am I going to fall down while I'm playing with kids? And is that going to set me back thousands of dollars? Healthcare is a human right, and I would implement universal healthcare.
I mean, what would it have meant to you not having healthcare as somebody in your 20s? You know, if you'd have fallen ill?
Everything.
I mean, what would have happened?
I had fallen and gotten stitches. Perhaps my parents could have stepped in and helped me, but I'm not certain of that. And I may have gotten a bill for $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, and I would have been put on a payment plan and had to pay that off month by month, and had tax collectors calling me all the time. I believe I was making around $22,000 a year. I would not be in a position to pay that. And the things I bought, the people I dated, the places I went would have been drastically altered.
And you actually remember feeling anxiety because you didn't have healthcare in your 20s? You know, because people in their 20s don't tend to worry a lot about their health.
I did. I mean, they probably have healthcare. I worked at a birthday party studio, and I was doing about 8 to 10 birthday parties a week. It was very fun and a great job. We would cut these giant ice cream cakes, and we had to do it quickly. And when I did it, I always thought, you cannot go fast, because if you cut yourself, you're going to alter your entire life. And the fear I felt made my hand shake. And when you are supported, you are free to do a great job and take risks. I did not have that freedom, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. I think everyone should be able to go to the doctor.
And do you think that exists now with all the healthcare reforms there have been?
Within the United
Since Obama,
States?
yeah.
Absolutely not, no. When I had my daughter, I have health care, but when I had my daughter, the bill said $36,000. I paid $600. If I had been a teenager or someone who didn't know they were pregnant and was having a baby and went to the hospital, I would have been faced with a $36,000 bill. That's ludicrous.
I mean, because people here just kind of assume, well, there are public hospitals in America.
That is not how it works, unfortunately. Yeah, people go into debt for decades because of the healthcare system in our country.
And in terms of delivering it, because America actually spends a lot of money on healthcare, more than
any other country, yes.
Do you have a thought of how you would do it?
I believe if it wasn't a business, I mean, this is kind of what I'm trying to do with my fiction a little bit, is zoom out and say, okay, well, what if Millie didn't have to buy a house? What if it was subsidized? We could create subsidies for healthcare and make sure that everyone is completely covered. We could tax higher income people more and make sure everyone is covered just the same way that other countries do as well. Instead of making sick people a business, it could just be a human right, but we don't choose to do that.
Socialized healthcare is what you mean.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And do you have a sense of why that is like talking about the devil to so many Americans?
I have no clue. I think that, well, there's a million things that people think, oh, if it's socialized, then the care isn't going to be as good anymore. I think certain people don't want to share a hospital with certain other people. I think people don't want to pay higher taxes. All of these reasons, to me, point to people not valuing human life the way that I wish they did, but I can't go and change everyone's minds.
Well, maybe.
Maybe.
Let's wait till the next book. Kylie Reid, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much for having me.